Good morning, everybody. Today is Thursday, June 23rd, 2016, and this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Thursday, everyone. Happy Thursday, Cheryl. It is 68 degrees and sunny here in upstate New York. It actually finally cooled down a little bit. We were roasting for a few days, hot and humid, but this is perfect weather. So where do we leave off yesterday? Oh, I want to stop. I have a few more thank yous to send out there. I want to say thank you to Shirley and thank you to Lone Frog for donating for the new servers that we had to put in here this weekend. Yesterday, I gave some thank yous as well. Thank you to Hopper, to Cracker, and to Maddie Clues. Guys, you know, I can't do it without you. This is a lot for one person. So you know I greatly appreciate it. There's going to be more coming. I actually need to work on reconfiguring this whole back end so we can get our storage solutions under control as well. There's lots of archives around that I need to get organized and on much bigger hard drives as I run out of space on a daily basis. So where do we leave off yesterday? We titled the show Synthetic Gut Bacteria Cures with quotation marks, Biocontrol and DNA in Electronics. And talk about disturbing. And we've been kind of going down this path of the merging of biology and technology for quite a while now. I would have to say if I put a gist on the show, that would be it. But it gets more horrifying by the day. We looked at good old Billy and Melinda Gates investing in that Synologics spinoff from MIT, creating synthetic gut bacteria to cure you, with quotations, be able to go in and start manipulating gut bacteria and different functions and turning things on and off for productions of things within your body. Like, talk about absolutely horrifying. We found out that the National Institute of Health, also back in 2014, pretty much gave up rights for reviewing most of these new quote-unquote therapies only in special instances. But, you know, when we were looking at the human synthetic genome, we found out that they didn't even take a second to look at that one. But guess what, guys? They did, because we found out that there was a vote that happened yesterday in regards to whether or not they were going to give the green light to use CRISPR gene editing technology on humans here in the United States. And yeah, you would have guessed it. A federal panel gives the green light to use gene editing on humans. Now, we already saw that that was allowed in China. We also saw that they were allowing it in UK for some rare genetic disorder at birth where the children don't live very long if not treated. But remember, it's only going to be in a petri dish. We have Harvard having secret meetings and then deciding a week later that, yes, they're going to try to create a synthetic human genome. So, hey, anything goes. Let's chuck it all out a window because we just got on the roller coaster, and this is one that's got a broken track on it. Scientists are one step closer to using CRISPR gene editing on humans. I wonder what Jennifer Dowda is thinking right now. With the U.S. Federal Advisory Panel approving the use of the technique for a study led by the University of Pennsylvania. And remember, the University of Pennsylvania is where they have been doing a lot of the mad science gone mad research on vaccines in food, namely lettuce there. The scientists are seeking to use CRISPR-Cas9 to create genetically altered T cells. And again, what's so bizarre about this is that this ties right back into the synthetic human immune system that we've been looking at for quite a number of weeks now. There were 3 or 4 different projects we discovered. It first started with DARPA, and then it spun out to a couple different projects that are on the plate right now, as well as one by IBM. It's very frightening. And also, this was the University of Pennsylvania that we read the story about yesterday with the T cells. But what's very disturbing about this is that they don't know if it's going to work. Your T cells are completely and directly related to immunity. And if they start flipping switches on and off, you very possibly could have an immune system gone awry. And I mean, you know, they make this sound like we are so technologically advanced and biologically advanced. People have come to expect that we can do anything, but what they don't point out is that this is experimental, step right up, dead, dying, desperate to become a part of this experimenting on humans that was considered to be unethical just a few months ago. There were ethics issues and there were all these meetings about ethics. And now all of a sudden, ethics have gone completely out of window and we are splicing and dicing humans. Think about that for a minute. Splicing and dicing humans to do things that we were never meant to do. We're going to look at some of these technological quote unquote advances here once we're done with the story. Anyway, this, of course, is going to be to cure all kinds of cancers. Scientists are seeking to use CRISPR-Cas9 to create genetically altered T cells, which are the white blood cells that play an important role in our immune system, that are more effective at fighting cancer in patients with melanoma, multiple myeloma, and sarcoma. And one thing I want to point out here, that sarcoma is what animals, and I don't know about humans, but I know for a fact from personal experience and then doing research after the fact that sarcomas can be caused by adjuvants in the 3 years rabies as well as the feline leukemia vaccine in cats. So interesting, they're going to work on trying to cure that, since the University of Pennsylvania was the place where they first discovered the vaccine-induced sarcoma per Wikipedia. Says our preliminary data suggests that we could improve the efficacy of these T cells if we use CRISPR, says lead researcher Carl June to the National Institute of Health's Recombinant DNA Advisory Committee on Tuesday. Unbelievable that we managed to catch it right on the day. This is just insane. This is insane. So the Recombinant DNA Advisory Committee gives it the green light in the proposed early stage 2-year trial. June and fellow researchers will use a process called CAR T cell treatment on 18. Count them, 18. That is 2 sets of fingers plus another hand and 3. 18, count them. The team will extract the patient's T cells, then genetically modify the patient's T cells with CRISPR to turn you into a genetically modified organism, which enables scientists to then effectively cut, copy, and paste literally segments of DNA and then re-inject those genetically modified T cells back into the patients, where they'll hopefully be better at targeting and destroying tumor cells. Wink. Our goal is to develop a new type of immunotherapy using gene editing technology that will enable the engineered immune cells to be more potent, survive longer, and thereby kill cancer cells more effectively. And what gets me is that really is how an adjuvant kind of worked. An adjuvant would irritate the immune system to make the immune system more responsive and longer lasting as far as exposure and recognition of a pathogen. So is this really getting rid of adjuvants? So we're just going to now genetically edit human T cells to make them attack anything and everything that looks like a foreign invader. It's frightening. It's absolutely frightening. Our goal is to develop a new type of immunotherapy. So just step right up and go to your allergist. In using gene editing technology that will enable the engineered immune cells to be more potent, survive longer, and thereby kill cancer cells more effectively. The NIH panel, the focus of which is biosafety and ethics, yep, well, we chucked it out a window, has approved the use of CRISPR for the study unanimously. Nobody even stood up and said, hold the phone, Chuck, with one member abstaining, biting their tongue until it bled, I'm sure. And if the research now goes ahead, it will be funded by the Parker Institute for Cancer Immunotherapy, who, yes, was founded by internet billionaire and Napster co-founder Sean Parker. So that's got to make you feel warm and fuzzy. that a Facebook billionaire is now the one who is funding research on genetically modifying, utilizing CRISPR technology, some of the first humans. It's just absolute, utter insanity. Says this is an important new approach. And you know what I didn't see in any of these stories that we've covered is all the research that they've done in mice and monkeys. Have you? Because I know I haven't. It is an important new approach. And we're going to learn a lot from this. One of the panel members, a clinical oncologist, Michael Atkins from Georgetown University, said, and hopefully it forms the basis of new types of 21st century therapies. But while this technique shows promise, the researchers acknowledge that it is still an experimental treatment and not guaranteed to work. Our previous efforts have been hampered because the infused T cells become exhausted and they either die or cease to function. Well, that sounds like a little problem. Also of concern are the ethical implications. Ding! Giving a green light to the use of CRISPR on humans. Some fear could open a Pandora's box leading to unwarranted genetic manipulation and things like designer babies. But hey, don't worry about it. This is a brave new world, and if you don't go along with it, Johnny, you're going to be left behind. You know, that is what's going to happen, you know, with all of this genetic testing and being able to splice and dice you in a database and compare and contrast, you know, as a million Americans step right up for that precision medicine cohort program and give up all the secrets of their biology to be able to then be used in research and correlations and running algorithms to determine who's defective and who's not. It's not going to be too long before they start commercializing some of these therapies. You know, they'll be able to make a good buck on it. A lot of people get rich, but what it's going to end up in the end is that they will be able to determine who is good breeding stock and who is not. You know, there's too many people on this planet, and holy shit, climate change. We can't feed everybody, so you know what? We're going to have to skip a year for breeding. And you, and you can't breed at all. Or maybe we'll let you get a genetic modification on that embryo to fix some of those genetic errors that we are detecting in your sperm and embryo. Just the implications here are mind-boggling. And the fact that we have a federal entity, this Recombatant DNA Committee, that is part of the National Institute of Health, that is rubber stamping, green lighting, being able to genetically modify humans, and they're supposed to be looking at the ethics. I didn't hear one squawk from anyone except the guy who pled the fifth and didn't vote at all, that there was some issues being seen here in the future. Genetic modification of children was very recently just the stuff of science fiction, says Pete Shanks, a consulting researcher with the U.S. Center for Genetics and Society, in an international summit on gene editing last year. But now, with this new technology, I mean, look at it. They're just insane. This fantasy, this wet dream could become a reality. And once this process begins, he says, there will be no going back. This is a line we must not cross. Well, you know, give it up for Pete Shanks for having one split second of common sense. Others say that the way that this CRISPR technique will be used by the University of Pennsylvania researchers is anything but controversial, likening it more to gene therapy. From an ethics perspective, I don't think it'll make any difference, says Henry T. Greeley, a legal researcher from Stanford University who specializes in bioscience. It's not anything new. It's just normal ethics of trying to do gene therapy. And that's what we found out in 2014. Those were some of the exact words that the National Institute of Health used for getting rid of looking at every case that is put up before them. Because, you know, this is gene therapy, sheen therapy. It's all the same thing. Once we've done it once, it's not anything new. So, you know, just like genetically modifying food, an apple is an apple, a potato is a potato, rubber stamp it and let it go because there is no difference. And nobody, none of these people that we are paying with our tax dollars to quote unquote keep us safe are watching the store. It is all in the name of corporate interest and getting rid of that line item R&D budget that big pharma and bio synthetic companies have had to pay out year after year as part of the research to prove that it's safe. So now in the name of 21st century medicine, and oh my God, the FDA keeping all these 21st century cures out of the hands of the desperate because of their regulations, pesky regulations. Let's just get rid of them all because it's going to be good for the consumer. Like I said the other day, caveat emptor, because it is not about you and me and our babies and trying to make them healthy. It is about making you a full-out guinea pig and becoming part of the machine. And if you die, if it goes awry, well, you know, there's always plausible deniability. But if not, hey, you stepped right up for an experimental procedure. Sorry, Charlie, because your number is up. Anyway, so there's no difference here in ethics. It's just, you know, hey, we're doing more crazy shit. What difference does it make? But for its part, the National Institute of Health is not unaware of the ethical issues posed by CRISPR editing and its application to people, which is one of the reasons that the RAC exists, to review this kind of protocol. Yeah, but then they just rubber stamp it and it goes out a window. And you know what? They're only looking at selective cases. They're not looking at every case. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening that never was approved anyway. Researchers in the field of gene transfer are excited by the potential of utilizing CRISPR-Cas9 to repair or delete mutations in defective humans, my addition, that are involved in numerous human diseases in less time and at a lower cost than earlier gene editing systems. And while the application of new gene editing technology in this field has great potential to improve human health, it is not without concerns. But in any case, the researchers will now need to secure approvals from other organizations before they can actually begin the study. And of course, that includes the Food and Drug Administration, which I'm going to guarantee you is going to rubber stamp this, and the medical centers where the trials are being conducted, as well as their own institutions. So it could be some time before we finally find out when this trial might see the light of day. You know, another interesting thing is that they don't even mention in here what these diseases are that they're going to be treating them for. Like I said, whether or not they ever experimented on animals with this long before humans, we know that they are already tinkering with the stuff, like I said, in China and in the UK. But don't worry about it, because it'll only be in a petri dish. We will never let these grow to full term. So as we're giving it all up to the machine, we've been talking about biosensors and how they're working on making them ubiquitous. You know, right now they can put them into mobile devices, but very soon it's going to be in your clothing and in your environment, and all tied to the Internet of Things. So you'll be able to have your remote doctor, you know, the interim before you end up with little nanobot doctors or synthetic genetically engineered gut bacteria to be inside of you fixing things. So here we go. A new test holds potential to diagnose a myriad of conditions with just a single drop of blood. You're going to have some sort of like blood thing on your cell phone next time predicting. Again, where is it? Oh, the University of Pittsburgh. Ding. Like they are in the middle of a lot of insanity right now. Have developed a unique method for detecting antibodies in a patient's blood in a proof of principle study that opens the door to development of simple diagnostic tests for diseases for which no microbial cause is known, including, and we talked about this yesterday, autoimmune diseases, cancers, and other conditions. And of course, they need a way, now that they're working on this new T-cell CRISPR immunity therapy, they need a way to identify new candidates. So let's have a simple one-drop blood test to be able to identify everyone that's in that database that might be able to benefit from being one of our guinea pigs. And let's listen to this because you're not even going to believe it. The results reported in the Journal of Immunological Methods and funded by who? I'm going to give you one guess. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are the first evidence that it is possible to develop blood tests for any infectious disease by screening random libraries of non-biological molecular shapes. Bill Gates has been very busy, and he is in the middle of a lot of the stuff. He also has his own gene editing investment that we read about a while ago. I don't remember the name of that company. And lots of different institutions that he's been investing in that are coming up with some of these new mad science vaccines. Back to the story. This is a, quote, a needle in a molecular haystack approach to a new way to develop diagnostics, says senior author David S. Burke, University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public Health Dean and Director of Pittsburgh Center for Vaccine Research. Wow, who would have guessed it? The method does not rely on starting with known viral components. This is important because there are conditions for which there is not a known antigen, such as newly emerging epidemics that just never before seen come out of the blue, as well as autoimmune diseases that, hey, we have no idea what causes them, but there's such an epidemic, wink, or even responses to a traumatic injury. But when a person's immune system is faced with an antigen or a foreign invader, such as an infectious disease, or even an injury with tissue damage, it responds by producing antibodies. Like puzzle pieces, specific parts of the surface of these antibodies fit the shape of the molecules on the invader or the damaged tissue. And the Pittsburgh researchers have used a technique pioneered by co-author Thomas Kodadek of the Scripps Research Institute that synthesizes random molecular shapes called peptoids, hooked onto a microscopic plastic bead. And the technique can then produce millions of molecular shapes. Peptoids are not organic, but if they match the corresponding shape on an antibody, that antibody will connect to them and allow the scientists to pull out that bead and examine that peptoid and its corresponding antibody. Using this technique, Dr. Burke's team has chemically generated a huge library of random molecular shapes. And then using blood from what? Oh, HIV-infected patients, step right up. As well as from non-infected people, the researchers then screened 1 million of these random molecular shapes to find the ones that bound only to the antibody present in the blood of HIV-infected patients, but not the healthy controls. No HIV proteins or structures were used to construct or select the peptoids, but the approach nonetheless successfully led to the selection of the best molecular shape to use in screening for HIV. This technology means that we may be able to take a single drop of blood from a patient and detect antibodies to all manners of infections, cancers, and any other conditions that they may be carrying or be exposed to. Look at one drop of blood and it will show all of your defects and everything that's wrong with you. This is absolutely crazy. Don't give it up to the machine. This is insane. We hope now that this is the first step toward development of an epi chip that can be used to reconstruct a person's entire exposure history, says Dr. Burke, who also holds the UPMC Jonas Salk Chair at the Global Health Initiative in Pittsburgh. And you know, we read about a diagnostic device very similar to this way back when in some of the DARPA funding rounds. So it seems to me not only DARPA, but Bill and Melinda Gates are sprinkling funding to get this off the ground. It's going to be beneficial to all of them because we'll be able to have vaccines and genetic modification to fix all that is wrong with us. Maybe even synthetic gut bacteria. Of course, that is the cause. Bad bacteria and that whole cascade we've talked about. That is how autoimmune disease begins. All right, well, To continue on with a drop of blood, we talked about Tommy Insel and his moving over from the National Institute of Mental Health to Google's Verily division. We looked at Google contact lenses and some of this new technology where they have been able to scan the orbital cortex, neocortex of the brain, which is right behind the eye. And they were able, in monkeys, to be able to determine the decision-making process in real time. I also discovered in digging into Tommy Insel, before Tommy Insel became the director of the National Institute of Mental Health, Tommy Insel was the head of behavioral psychology for a large organization. So very interesting that his division is digging into being able to read real-time decision-making processes, as well as has a device that they are looking to release that goes into the eye that touches that very portion of the brain. Well, give it up, because we know that there's also all kinds of dementia now. We have Alzheimer's, we have brain wasting disease, we have mental disease as a spectrum disorder. We can be able to diagnose, and we're going to start this very soon, by your voice patterns as to whether or not you have a mental problem. Well, scientists have now developed a blood test that detects Alzheimer's disease early with 100% accuracy. So step right up and give your blood, because they'll be able to tell you whether or not you are defective right now and begin your treatment 20 years before you get sick. What makes Alzheimer's disease such a terrifying prospect is the inevitability of it all. We have no vaccines or preventative measures, and if you either get Alzheimer's or you don't, and once you have it, there is little hope of recovery, because we have no treatment or cure. And oh, by the way, we discovered that it could be transmissible through blood transfusions as well as dental work. Oh yes, forgot to mention that one. But what if we could detect this disease years before symptoms start to appear, to not only give patients a chance to slow the progression, but also give researchers better insight into how it develops so they can use you as a guinea pig too. A proof of concept trial of a new blood test has just been completed, and the team behind it has reported unparalleled accuracy in detecting the early stages of Alzheimer's. It is now generally believed that Alzheimer's-related changes in the brain begin at least a decade before the emergence of symptoms. You know, make sure you didn't take a lot of Benadryl or sleep aids in your youth, because, we discovered after all these years of you taking them over the counter that they can cause dementia as well. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first blood test using an autoantibody biomarker that can accurately detect Alzheimer's at an early point in the course of the disease, when treatments are more likely to be beneficial. And that is before too much of the brain devastation has occurred. Of course, we got to make sure we line up more brain patients to work with all these neurologists that are getting out of school and want to be part of this global brain project. We got Zika patients. Now we need all the Alzheimer's patients put in a database. The test is designed to detect an early stage of Alzheimer's disease called mild cognitive impairment and distinguish it from similar cases of mental decline that are caused by other factors such as vascular issues, chronic depression, alcohol abuse, and the side effects of certain drugs. Not Benadryl. For the trial, it didn't say that, but I threw that in there. For the trial, don't you think like Benadryl and Tylenol PM should have a class action lawsuit against them, since they've been selling these over the market for all these years without anything saying that, oh yeah, if you use this for 2-3 months or more because you have serious allergies because of all the GMOs you ate that killed all your gut bacteria and put you into, complete immune system awryness, that 20 years down the line, you might end up a drooling participant in a brain study. It's just beyond disturbing, but they're allowed to get away with it because, again, it's plausible deniability, though there were studies published on it, so I don't see how there can't be a class action lawsuit. I took Benadryl for years on end, and it was the only way that I could survive my allergies. The test is designed to detect an early stage of Alzheimer's. Yeah, we read that. And for the trial, Nagel and his team took blood samples from 236 participants including 50 of those who had been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, 50 with mild to moderate Alzheimer's, and 50 healthy controls, and the remainder had been diagnosed with mild to moderate Parkinson's disease, early stage Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, and or breast cancer. The MCI patients have been diagnosed based on having low levels of amyloid beta 42 peptide in their cerebral spinal fluid. Can you say that one early in the morning? Which has been identified as a predictor of rapid Alzheimer's progression. Autoantibodies are a particular type of antibody produced by the immune system to target certain proteins in the body, and this can sometimes go horribly wrong and end up as autoimmune disease. But the way they respond to different types of diseases has made them a very promising new candidate for detection and diagnosis. You know, the problem that I see here is that autoimmune disease, I really think, has a lot to do with the crap that they've been genetically modifying already and getting into our body without our knowledge. And there are other factors, like I was saying yesterday. Stress really helps exacerbate the situation. And especially once you already have an autoimmune disease, it can then help an entire gamut of them come to light. But how disturbing that they are now identifying autoimmune proteins, and we're going to start targeting them because, you know, these are the root of so many diseases, and all you defective people, we're going to fix you with 21st century medicine. Anyway, with this disease affecting approximately 5.3 million people in the U.S., yes, let's get all crazy thinking about how many patients we're going to have to do Mad Science Gone Mad on, including almost half the population at 85 years or older. So step right up, Nana. We do need tests like this, and who knows, maybe if we get to know Alzheimer's better in its early stages, we might just be able to figure out how it begins and then prevent it. And one more. This new blood test could personalize your treatment and diagnosis for depression for the very first time. You know, all you depressed people who have gone and asked for your antidepressants, who could probably no longer own a firearm in the U.S. Yes, you. Scientists have now developed a new blood test that could give you up to the machine without ever admitting to your doctor that you have depression, giving doctors a tool that can identify which antidepressants are likely to work for patients the first time around, instead of relying on trial and error where they give you medication. You have a CYP 450 enzyme deficiency and you go insane and start shooting up your neighborhood when they give you medication. Yeah, those types of diagnoses. I wonder if Dr. Lucier has seen this study. This could make a huge difference, because the current treatment method for depression, doctors trying out one medication after another till something sticks, really isn't effective, with roughly 50% of all first-time prescriptions failing to help those in need. And if a treatment does end up working, it could take weeks to find out either way. Right. And in the meantime, they could go completely insane and be another case of a mass shooting in the United States that they could point to and say, look, people are all radicalized by the internet. We need to ban guns. No. We need to stop doctors from prescribing poisons without knowing what they're doing, that then can cause you to have worse problems than you had before you were taking the medications. This new test, developed by researchers from King's College London in the UK, can predict if a certain antidepressant will work on an individual patient before a doctor prescribes it, looking for 2 inflammation biomarkers. Now, again, CYP450 enzyme, look that up. It is responsible for your uptake of medications as well as many other metabolic processes. But the interview that was done with Dr. Yolanda Lucier out of Australia, she worked for many years as a clinical psychologist in the prison system and had found that there were marked increases in people committing horrific crimes, shoot 'em ups, murder, suicide type things, after being prescribed antidepressants. And so she, in her study, had called for some DNA testing on these prisoners who had shown no violent tendencies or behavior before they committed the crime after taking their medications. And she discovered that in almost every case, that there was a deficiency in the cytochrome P450 enzyme. And what's even more interesting is that after that interview back a few years ago, Madison Rupert did one with her, and I think the Truth or Talk girls did one with her as well. They did. There was a study that came out that showed that glyphosate, yes, aka Roundup, Monsanto's creation that's sprayed on all of our foods, well, not all of them, but lots of them, it is the number one used herbicide. That glyphosate causes a suppression of the cytochrome P450 enzyme, which means that if you've eaten glyphosate-laden food and then you've taken some antidepressants, there's a really good chance that you might have a really bad reaction. But hey, nobody's testing for that. Maybe, just maybe, some of this inflammation biomarker will be related to that. I don't know. Let's find out. 2 of these biomarkers have previously been linked to patients who have poor responses to typical medications. Yes. Which that is what the cytochrome P450 enzyme is responsible for, like I said, is uptake of medications. And to test accurately whether or accurately measure how many of these biomarkers a person has, or if they have a higher certain threshold, they will likely not respond to what is called a first line of antidepressants, the ones that doctors first test. And the identification of the biomarker that predicts this treatment is crucial in reducing the social and economic burden of depression and improving the quality of life of patients, of course, but not having you as a guinea pig. That doesn't have anything to do with it. It's all about for your benefit. This study provides a clinical suitable approach for personalizing antidepressant therapy. Patients who have blood inflammation of a certain threshold could be directed toward an earlier access to more assertive antidepressant strategies, including the addition of other antidepressants or anti-inflammatory drugs. Mental illness is estimated to cost $151 billion in the UK, and the World Health Organization says depression will become the second biggest cause of health problems in the world by 2020. In other words, this blood test was a long time in coming, and mental health organizations around the world are chiming in with support. Well, again, we read about gut bacteria and its connection to brain chemicals, depression, and many other mental disorders. It's very interesting that they would be working with trying to diagnose it and then wanting to give you pharmaceuticals as opposed to just some good bacteria for your gut to see what happens. But don't worry about it, because we have some synthetic gut bacteria funded by Bill and Melinda Gates. And now we also have scientists figuring out how to use bacteria as living hard drives. Yeah, the merger between biology and technology has happened, and they are trying to suck us all into the machine, molecule by molecule, DNA strand by DNA strand, blood drop by blood drop. Computers are becoming more like living beings. Ding! And now it looks like living beings are becoming more like computers. Ding, ding. It's horrifying. I don't even know what to say to any of this anymore. Let's just keep reading the horror. New research has demonstrated a method for storing lines of code in living bacteria, which can then be passed down to the next generation as genetic information. You know, you gotta love it, because I am sure Bill Gates is fully aware of this, because they are programming that gut bacteria to put into people to treat inflammation. Sounds like a wicked orgy to me of mad science gone mad. This new procedure enables 100 bytes of data to be successfully stored in good old E. coli. But scientists say that it has a potential to upload even more data than that and could eventually aid research in developmental biology and synthetic devices. Our good old friend CRISPR-Cas9, The amazing gene editor has made all of this possible. I really hope that Jennifer Dauda has horrific nightmares for unleashing this bioweapon on the world. You know, they are still fighting over who owns the technology. I think Jennifer Dauda should find a way to destroy it all. We found out about that one not-for-profit company a while back that had sent out 60,000 copies of the CRISPR-Cas9 bacteria to anyone and everyone who wanted to get their hands on it to genetically modify things in their garage. Well, this has just gone way beyond insanity now. Anyway, so it makes it all possible. The device has already opened up new ways of rewriting DNA segments, and now researchers Harvard University, where they are looking to create the first synthetic human genome, were able to use the bacteria's own CRISPR-Cas9 style editing processes to write specific code. When the bacteria detects a virus, it cuts and pastes a part of the virus's DNA into its own genome so it can recognize that virus again in the future. Sounds more like synthetic immune systems again. This security checklist is passed on through the generations, and which is how organisms can build up immunity to certain viruses over time. As William Herkowitz reports for Popular Mechanics, in this case, the team created their own code, and then they again put it in a Trojan horse and disguised it as a virus. And they do that to circumvent the body's own protections. And when this fake virus was introduced into the bacteria, the same CRISPR-Cas swapping took place. And hey, presto, it says, the data was embedded into the bacteria itself. Anything at all could be stored within this code, from a poem to a computer program or your cat photos. And it builds on previous research into storing data with DNA. We looked at those DNA hard drives that then can be encased in glass and live for billions of years. But here the challenge was to repeat this trick inside a living cell using its own natural processes. Yeah, a living cell. So E. coli today, humans tomorrow, working within a living cell is an entirely different story and a challenge, says geneticist and lead researcher Seth Shipman to Popular Mechanics. And rather than synthesizing DNA and then cutting it into a living cell, we wanted to know if we could use nature's own method to write directly onto the genome of a bacterial cell so it could get copied and pasted to every subsequent generation. Right. Sounds a lot like the same CRISPRing that they are using to circumvent having to tell you whether or not something is genetically modified. And it should make you afraid. As a bacteria is storing the data they receive sequentially, it is much easier to retrieve at a later stage via genetic analysis called genotyping. But there are potential problems along the way. Not all the bacteria received all the data presented, which means you might get an incomplete piece, which would mean that you would need a larger sample size in order to get a full message back. And Shipman thinks that there's plenty more to come. Some cells will have room for 3,000 bytes of data, and there is also potential for special genetically designed hard drive bacteria that could take the idea even further. It's amazing research, but even at these tiny capabilities, we recommend that you don't trade in your old hard drives just yet. I mean, where do we even follow that up with? Well, we follow it up here. Organs on a chip. Allow new views of human biology. Yeah, let's make organs on a chip now, too. Miniature simulations allow scientists to study physiological mechanisms and behaviors in ways never before possible, creating opportunities for drug development. Yay! Now, again, this was another DARPA project, body on a chip. Outside Hollywood special effects shops, you won't find living human organs floating in biology labs. Set aside all the technical difficulties with sustaining an organ outside the body, and full organs are too precious as transplants to use in experimentation. but many important biological studies, except for the ones that they're growing. Remember, they made the human pig chimeras that they are growing human organs in, and I'm trying to remember what university that was at. It was either MIT or Harvard. But hey, don't worry about that one. We won't talk about human animal chimeras for organs. But many important biological studies or 3D printing of organs using stem cells. But many important biological studies and practical drug tests can be done only by studying an organ as it operates, and this new technology could fill this need by growing functional pieces of human organs in miniature on microchips, just like the little mini brain balls we talked about. In 2010, 6 years ago, Donald Ingerber from the good old Weiss Institute, home of the RoboBees, developed and Swarm Technologies, developed a lung on a chip, the first of its kind. And the private sector quickly jumped in with companies such as Emulate, headed by Ingerber and others from the Weiss Institute, forming partnerships with researchers in the industry and government, including, DARPA, the more affectionately known as the U.S. Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. See, I knew we talked about bodies on a chip from DARPA. So far, various groups have reported success in making miniature models of the lung, liver, kidney, heart, bone marrow, and cornea, and others will certainly follow. And of course, once we can make bodies on a chip, what's going to prevent them from making a human on a chip? They already have been able to make brains, mini brain balls, and petri dishes, and connect these things together in a full system that is functioning in miniature. We can program DNA and we can program different processes and cells within the body. How long is it going to be before we start making what they called in Battlestar Galactica skin jobs? I think we read in one of the DARPA stories, they were calling them replicants, this future technology that they're working on. I don't know, guys. How can we compete with this? I mean, it was one thing to have lab animals in a cage and have activists out there releasing monkeys in the dead of the night all dressed in ninja gear. But it's another thing when we have living, and they had said about those mini brain balls out of making them out of plurpunin skin cells that were living in petri dishes, that those mini brain balls actually were alive, but they didn't have any input yet. They didn't have eyeballs or ears or any of the five senses to be able to make sense of the world, but they're alive. I mean, what are the ethics of all this? We have thrown biology and the sanctity of life, the wonder of being alive, just our short period of time to experience biology that lives in this wonderful ecosystem that we call Earth. We've thrown that out a window. We've made it a commodity. We've made it a science experiment in some lunatic's laboratory. I say firebomb it all. I say get out the flamethrowers and get rid of these freaks of nature. This is just not right. I'm telling you, if there is an asteroid out there that is heading for Earth, please hurry up before this turns into the Isle of Dr. Moreau. You know, who wants their children and their grandchildren to live in a world of genetically modified lunatics? Because this is not the world that it's supposed to be. This is the world of being trapped in the forever land of insanity. Just really upsets me because this is so wrong and nobody is standing up. None of these professionals, they're all bought out, and if you open your mouth, you lose your career. So just shut the fuck up and keep doing it. When nutrients, blood, and test compounds such as experimental drugs are pumped through these tubes, the cells replicate some of the key functions of living organs, and the chambers inside the chip can then be arranged to simulate the particular structure of an organ tissue, such as tiny little air sacs in a lung. Air running through a channel, for example, can then be accurately simulated human breathing, and meanwhile, blood laced with bacteria can be pumped through other tubes, and scientists can then observe how cells respond to infection without any risk at all to a person. Phew! The technology allows scientists to see biological mechanisms and physiological behaviors never before seen, giving up more secrets to biology. Organ microchips will also give a boost to companies developing new drugs. Oh, yes, Big Pharma needs a boost. Their ability to emulate human organs allows for more realistic and accurate tests of drug candidates so they don't put poisons out on the market that kill people 20 years later and you become part of a class action lawsuit. Actually, your children become part of a class action lawsuit after you're dead. Last year, for example, one group used a chip to mimic the way that endocrine cells secrete hormones into the bloodstream and used this to perform critical tests on a new diabetes drug. Other groups are now exploring the use of organs on a chip in personalized medicine. Yes. Remember, Obama sold us whole to the drug medical establishment. In principle, these microchips could be constructed using stem cells, ding, ding, from the patients themselves, diddle-ling-a-ling, and tests could then be run to identify individualized therapies that are more likely to succeed. Yes, they can make a little mini you on a chip, and they could start testing all kinds of things, and you were identified by your genetic defects in the database to step right up for this test. This is just, I don't even know how to express my upsettedness for all of this. There is a reason to hope that miniature organs could greatly reduce the pharmaceuticals industry's reliance on animal testing. Oh, tug on the heartstrings of experimental compounds, and millions of animals are sacrificed each year in such tests, a practice that provokes heated controversy. Ethical considerations aside, oh yes, let's just put those aside. Don't worry about it, Johnny. It is proven to be immensely wasteful. Animal trials rarely provide reliable insights into how humans will react to the same drug, and tests done on miniaturized human organs might do better. Ain't anyone ever hear of a simulation on a computer? I think that we have enough knowledge now of how things work to just have a big human simulation on a screen, and then let's do a simulation of a drug. I don't think you need to accurately create a miniaturized version of me to see how medication is going to react inside my body. And of course, military and biodefense researchers, yeah, step right up for that, experimental program for all the drugs. What the hell was it called? Project BioShield. To see the potential for organs on a chip to save lives in a very different way. This simulated lung and other devices like it could be the next big step in testing responses to biological, chemical, or radiological weapons. Yay! Yes, our biological, chemical, and radiological programs never ended, people. And this is not possible for us to do today. So, of course, we have Plum Island moved to Manhattan, Kansas at the university for obvious ethical reasons. Unless, of course, we declare an emergency and then we can open up that Project BioShield stockpile and start using them on you and your children. All right. So, need to see. Here we go. Artificial synapses could let supercomputers mimic the human brain. So don't worry about it, Johnny, because we'll be able to mimic your brain. We don't need humans anymore. Researchers said the technology could improve robots, self-driving cars, and stock trades. Large-scale brain-like machines with human-like abilities to solve problems could soon become a reality. Now that researchers have invented microscopic gadgets that mimic the connections between neurons in the human brain better than any other previous devices. This new research could lead to better robots, better self-driving cars, better data mining, better medical diagnosis, better stock trading analysis, and other smart human interaction systems and machines in the future, says Tae-Woo Lee, a materials scientist at the Ponghong University of Science and Technology in Korea and senior author of the study. The human brain's enormous computing power stems from its connections, and previous research suggested that the brain had approximately 100 billion neurons and roughly 1 quadrillion connections wiring these cells together. And at each point of these connections or synapses, a neuron typically fires about 10 times a second. In principle, the human brain can perform about 10 quadrillion operations a second. And in comparison, the world's fastest supercomputer, the Tianhe 2 in China, is capable of carrying out up to 55 quadrillion calculations per second, according to the Top 500 project, which ranks the 500 most powerful computers in the world. However, previous research suggests that the human brain consumes only about 20 watts of power, which is barely enough to run a dim light bulb, where the Tianhe 2 consumes 17.8 megawatts of power. And what's really interesting about that Tianhe 2, and them mentioning that in regards to this article and this researcher in Korea, that Tianhe 2 in China was using Intel chips that John Kerry and the State Department have banned them from purchasing now to increase the power of their supercomputer. Scientists would like to build computers that mimic the human brain's power and efficiency, and development of artificial synapses with comparable behaviors to biological ones would be a first critical step. And I think tomorrow we are going to dig deeper into the brain, because there are some new brain scanning technologies and extraction of images out of brains, as well as implanting false memories and creating these new brain circuits, which is beyond disturbing, that they can implant and tie you to the machine. I think we looked at some of that yesterday. But they're going to be standardizing us just like they standardize technology, so we will be able to interoperate on a whim. Researchers created an organic nanowire synaptic transistor that emulates the working principles of biological synapses. And yeah, this is actually another one in Korea. Mad Science Gone Mad facility that we have there. All right, guys, well, make sure you stick around. Mr. Kevin Blanche is live up next. It is Thursday, so lots of live radio. We have a brand new Chuck Ocelli this afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. Game On with Ron Stevens live at 7. Behind the Woodshed this week's at 8 p.m. Eastern. And then Anti-Media Radio with SM Gibson live at 10. All right, guys, you have an awesome Thursday, and I will catch up with you tomorrow. Everybody take care.